Hey, welcome to the Football Diary podcast. How's it going? Liverpool are Carabao Cup winners, beating Chelsea 1-0 in extra time. I'll be discussing that game with Dave and Miles today, as well as Arsenal's 4-1 thrashing of Newcastle and how their stunning form looks far away from last season's bottle job at this stage last year. Also, Villa take a firmer grip on top four with a resolute 4-2 win over Nottingham Forest, and Palace start the Oliver Glasner era with an impressive win. But we'll start at Wembley, guys. Chelsea 0, Liverpool 1. It's a weird game for the neutral, wasn't it? There was not many clinical opportunities being taken, hence it being 0-0 and going to extra time. But Liverpool will be absolutely thrilled with the result, Miles, obviously. The start of this talk of a quadruple. We've been down this road before with Liverpool, haven't we? What did you make of the game? It's a funny one to analyse as a neutral, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, because I don't think there was a great deal of quality in it, despite it being so open. There were some good chances made for both teams. I think Chelsea probably had the better chances, but Liverpool created more of them, and eventually that paid off. I actually think this is the fairest result that could have happened. Liverpool, I think, were good value for the win, and considering the circumstances around the game, absolutely, this was the right outcome. I think when you consider how many players Liverpool had absent, that team realistically of kids with Van Dijk, Kanate, just kind of Marshall and everything else, that's a really impressive win for them. And Chelsea have to look at themselves and what a missed opportunity this is, because you don't get many worse Liverpool teams in a cup final than the one they had today. And Van Dijk pretty much single-handedly managed to beat Chelsea. It's very poor from Chelsea's point of view.
Yeah, it's an interesting one into thinking what Chelsea will take from this, Dave. And we'll talk about those in a minute. But let's look at Liverpool and their reaction to this. Obviously, this is the start of what's going to be quite an emotional kind of end of the season, isn't it? It's nothing like this, really. And there are echoes, really, for this team, I think, of United when Ferguson was leaving. There's a few players you're thinking, are they over the hill? There's a few young players coming through. And how they cope after Klopp will be interesting to see. But how they finish with Klopp, this has got to be the start of a galvanising end for them. Whatever happens, something is going to be positive, at least. There's a trophy to his name. What do you think they'll take from this?
I think they'll take a lot of heart. I think from the performance itself, there were moments in their game where I think there were turning points. I think when Gravenberch went off injured, that was a moment where you thought, this is not looking good for Liverpool. And you looked at their bench at the beginning of the game. They really lacked a lot of experience in there. And they ended the game with their senior players really stood up. I think Luis Diaz did as well as he could, to be honest. I think there are times when he tried to do a little bit too much, but I thought his effort was, so commendable in how much energy he put into the play in the front line, and then obviously in that midfield, which they really controlled for much of the game. To be honest, I think Conor Bradley had another outstanding game. It's crazy, really, to see how soundly he's adjusted to the senior game. Obviously, this is a kid who's only had 6 or 7 senior games, I think, and he just looks completely at home with it. I think that with the game itself, I think if you look at especially extra time, I don't think anyone anticipated it to pan out the way it did. If you looked at how the 90 minutes finished, Chelsea finished so strongly, it looked like a matter of time before they would score sort of after 85 minutes, and they were cranking up the pressure. So for Liverpool to actually go on, and I think especially that trio of subs that they made at the very end of the game, the Dan's provided a lot more energy for them on the front foot, and they just continued on the front foot until Van Dijk, obviously. Chelsea didn't take that first warning, the goal that got disallowed, and then conceded a very similar goal.
Interesting, though, to think about this Liverpool average age of the team that finished Miles, and the Chelsea match as well. Their team was matching up almost pound for pound, almost like 4 times the value or something like that. Somebody said it was ridiculous how much money was spent on this Chelsea team compared to the youth of this Liverpool team. I know that was enforced by the injuries they had, but it does make you think how life after Klopp will work when a manager of his calibre can get a team performing at that level in a cup final with players that have got zero experience, a couple of games each to their name, some of them. He's going to be hard to replace, isn't he, Jurgen Klopp? And I think this kind of highlights how good he is for Liverpool.
Yeah, of course. I think Carragher and Neville mentioned it quite a few times on commentary that one of the things that was really valuable about Klopp is the amount of trust that he puts into young players, and actually how many managers would have the confidence to turn to those young players in a cup final when they needed them, and not just kind of rely on the fact that Gakpo could keep going, for example, because actually Gakpo was largely ineffective through most of the game, and replacing him, Dave's right, was fundamental for Liverpool going forward and kind of causing Chelsea more problems. So yeah, of course, it would be a real struggle to kind of find anyone to fill those boots. We knew that way before this final, but I think even seeing now that with the bare bones of this squad, you can't argue with what a triumph this is. And then on the other side of the coin, you've got a Chelsea side, which is also really young, I think we should remember, and is still kind of coming together. But they looked far more naive and far less like a team. They've played together far more than a lot of these young players at Liverpool will have had experience in the first team. And yet they look like strangers for the majority of the game. They had these like weird short spells where they were progressing really, really well and playing really nice football, passing the ball in good triangles, kind of moving for each other. And then that would just disappear for like 30 minutes at a time. And it's very odd. So the maturity of this Liverpool side clearly comes from the leadership that it has in Klopp and Van Dijk, because I thought he was imperious today. Him and Canate, I think, both had excellent games. And Chelsea obviously made chances because, well, look at the star power they had on the pitch in theory. They were always going to make chances. But Liverpool's defence, and Kelleher as well, dealt with it incredibly well, I thought.
So when you look at this game, and there was a few flashpoints, Dave, wasn't there, from a VAR point of view, and I think both teams will have some right to feel aggrieved that decisions didn't go their way. But let's focus on the ones that affected Liverpool mainly. So the first goal was disallowed. Trying to wrap my head around this because, was it Endo who was pushing a player away, and he was in an offside position when doing so? Yeah, it was Levi Colwill, wasn't it? And the argument was that Colwill would have helped defend Van Dijk's attack on the goal, which stands to reason, I guess. But these kind of things happen in the box all the time. And I think that's the argument here. How much consistency are we going to have now with this kind of action in the box? Was it purely the fact that he was in an offside position when it happened? Or is the fact that it happened the issue? It's a bit of a grey area, and I've not seen many examples of this kind of decision being upheld before. So where does the consistency for this kind of thing start and end?
The offside was very circumstantial. I think it was another one of those. I think I've seen one earlier in the season. Harry Maguire scored as a header where he was in a position where you don't know whether the defender would have got to it or not, and he interrupted in play and United scored from it. It was another one of those. It's almost going back to the old days when offside, it was basically if you're offside, and it was called as an offside. And that's kind of how it seemed. And I think it was a little bit harsh, to be honest. Again, it's very circumstantial because you're saying that, is that defender definitely going to get to the ball ahead of Virgil van Dijk? I mean, we won't know. And I mean, a betting man would say Van Dijk probably beats any player to that ball, which you know is so strong in the air. It's a difficult one to analyse really, but obviously the official has made that decision, and you know we're constantly wondering, aren't we, over some of the officiating this season, and obviously the decision making that VAR obviously look at.
Well, it's that we watch replays of things like that, and we're still thinking, well, I don't know what the referee's going to say. I don't know what the officials are going to say at the end of it. And it was similar with the Caicedo challenge on Ryan Gravenberch. Like you said, obviously injured the guy. Yeah. So, I mean, should he have been on the pitch, Caicedo, Miles? Do you think that was he unlucky?
It's not the first time with Caicedo. I don't know what's happened to him, but he looks. I honestly think he looks terrible at Chelsea. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't watch enough of him. But anytime I watch him play for Chelsea, he looks so clumsy and like clunky on the ball, and he just doesn't seem to have that same sort of nous that he had at Brighton to read the game really well, distribute the ball really well. He's reckless, and I think the challenge probably was just a yellow card. It was a very poor challenge. I think
didn't even get yellow
to send him off, but yeah, he didn't even get booked. And with the first decision, like Dave says, it's frustrating not knowing what the outcome is going to be from the official. That's kind of true, but some things are subjective in football, and I'm okay with that. I think this decision was very harsh on Liverpool, but I think it gave Chelsea a bit of a get-out-of-jail-free card, because again, I think their naivety showed, because other than that, it was Chilwell marking Van Dijk.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of pairing is that? I know, obviously, like Dave says, he's such a big presence. It's going to be hard for anyone to mark him, but it just felt like throughout this game, Chelsea got away with a lot and failed to capitalise on it. They could have gone down to 10 men with Caicedo on multiple occasions, actually, because he committed so many fouls across the game. He was giving the ball away left, right and centre, and Liverpool failed to capitalise on it as well. they had that decision go in their favour, obviously, with the Van Dijk goal. All of Liverpool's players are out. There is no better time for Chelsea to have taken advantage. And Dave's right, going into extra time, I was convinced Chelsea had got it then. They were able to bring like Mudryk and Madueke and Nkunku off the bench. That's some real serious attacking talent. And they absolutely capitulated. They just looked so naive and lacked any kind of maturity, particularly that midfield. I thought Enzo Fernandez and Caicedo, neither of them gave themselves any kind of glory. I thought they were both, to be honest, quite embarrassing performances at times.
Well, you say Conor Gallagher was the shining light. We said that before the game, really. And how many times has that been the case when the three of them have been on the pitch? And he's the one they consider potentially dispensable. It's crazy, isn't it? Some of the figures that you think about, they've paid for these players and they're just not producing. And Chelsea, once again, kind of their own worst enemies in this game. The amount of chances they created and could have scored from. Do you think they've got a right to be aggrieved, Dave, with Raheem Sterling's disallowed goal? Was there anything in there that makes you think that probably wasn't offside? Because the angle they shown back from the replay was so tight. Like, it was such a weird angle. I couldn't see any definitive lines that proved either way. It was almost inconclusive.
I've seen the other one now, though.
It does look offside from the other one.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah. It was very close, wasn't it?
I don't understand why it takes them so long to show these other angles sometimes. VAR. It obviously creates kind of doubt, I think, especially in fans as well. They show these completely unfavourable angles where you think, well, that's onside. But then they're so delayed in actually showing, the ideal angles. But I think it was offside. I mean, Chelsea had so many chances where they should be kicking themselves, really, because with the chances that they had, particularly at the end of the second half, they should really have probably won the game, to be honest. But I did notice when Conor Gallagher was forced to come off, they just lacked a bit of thrust, to be honest. He was the one.
He looked gutted, didn't he?
He was the one providing that tempo, and that, especially when they were pressing, he was always the guy kind of getting them up the field. They just lacked a bit of seniority, I think, especially in the extra time period where there wasn't any leadership in there to actually give them extra. Yeah.
Even he looked really nervous, though. The whole Chelsea team seemed nervous.
That's
a few
true.
of them really grew into the game. First 15 minutes, they were terrible, Chelsea. And Liverpool, honestly, they could have had 2 or 3 with the way that Chelsea were playing. Like, Malo Gusto just seemed to be giving the ball away every time he touched it, putting it out for a throw-in. And then by the end of the game, he was probably Chelsea's best player. I thought he really grew into it. Yeah. But Gallagher was the same. Gallagher, I think he's fantastic. And I think he probably was one of Chelsea's most threatening players. He should have scored 2 or 3 goals, though, really. And it seemed like nerves. That one where Kelleher comes and closes him down, he's better than that. He should have taken that chance. Absolutely.
Just hesitated, didn't he?
And it's the other way around. It was Liverpool that were fielding teenagers who've never played in a big game before, and all of a sudden they're in a cup final. And these Chelsea players, like Enzo Fernandez has won the World Cup, let's not forget. And then he's trying this weird back heel at the goal where he's got like 3 players he can lay it off to. It's terrible.
It was a simple ballback. And
he just didn't look.
We can't go on without mentioning Gary Neville's one-liner towards the end.
Brilliant.
£1 billion bottle job.
Yeah.
The £1 billion bottle jobs, yeah. I think, well...
Excellent.
It's one of them seasons where Chelsea will look to write it off now in some ways because they've got the FA Cup still to play for, haven't they? I'm sure they'll be looking to try and progress or at least win that. But in the league... they're struggling to finish in the top 10. So it's a strange season for Chelsea. And it's almost one of those ones where, a bit like Manchester United, we kind of have to look to next season now and try and sort of consolidate as much as we can this time around. But for Liverpool, obviously, they've been away from the Premier League this weekend and they still remain top. But have you got any concerns, Miles, looking at how threadbare their team is becoming, that they can stay there?
I think any team that suffers the kind of injuries that Liverpool have had would struggle, and we're talking about really, really key players. So the fact that they've come through this cup final without Alisson, Salah, Núñez, Trent might galvanise them slightly and help them move forward. Obviously, they've got that added momentum of Klopp kind of pushing for one last hurrah as well, and I think that will give them a massive boost. However, when the fixtures do start piling up, when European football comes back as well, they need to get these players back quickly. Seeing Gravenberch go off today is the last thing they needed. Like, it's such a difficult point. And when Arsenal and City are firing and kind of climbing back up the table and competing, it does seem dangerous because you can't say that Arsenal's squad's hit by anywhere near the kind of injury crisis that Liverpool are having, and neither are City really now. Yeah. So that is a danger. It is, but all credit to them today. I think it's very rare that we give Liverpool praise on this podcast as two Man United fans and myself. But I have to say, they dug in when they needed to. They played good football at times as well, despite kind of still trying to gel things together. And Van Dijk proved why he is one of the best leaders, definitely, in world football. He was absolutely outstanding, I thought. He really commanded it. And the fact that he went forward and managed to put the ball in the back of the net twice as well showed what today meant to him, I think, as well. And then really wanting to give Klopp that last, at least, something to take away from it. So who knows whether they can do that in the league as well.
Well, I think it's a performance that Klopp is rightly proud of. And as you say, if anything, it probably proves that they can grind out a performance against the top team in situations and circumstances that are kind of against them. So, yeah, well played, Liverpool, he says through gritted teeth. But meanwhile, in the Premier League, especially at the top of the Premier League, Arsenal 4, Newcastle 1. I don't know if that's a result we saw coming, but the way Arsenal are playing at the minute, probably, they are looking absolutely irresistible, aren't they? And Alan Shearer called it shambolic from Newcastle's perspective. But looking at the way Arsenal played and the way they've been playing now, what's that, 6 games won in a row since the start of the year? And it's unbelievable how many goals they're scoring too, Dave, isn't it? They have a goal difference of plus 39 now, which kind of puts them that ever so slightly ahead in the goal difference stakes in the top 3. So the title race, if it came down to it, they've done wonders for that on that perspective, haven't they? And they continue to just impress with these amazing goal-scoring games.
I mean, it's hard to look past them at the minute, I think, in terms of the title. They're, definitely the most informed team in the league. You got to say, obviously, that had that little blip a few weeks ago, which they got through. But you look at the fixtures, taking out of account the, obviously, Porto result midweek, they've, been in imperious form and made real light work, to be honest, of this Newcastle team who, no mugs in themselves. If you look, actually, Newcastle made a couple of changes to this team and obviously made an adjustment at fullback to deal with Saka. And if anything, it had zero effect. Saka was absolutely outstanding in this game. And again, players, we speak about the lack of goals when we're worried about, obviously, Jesus getting injured, who's going to come in and fill in for the goals. But everyone's contributing again. And Havertz again had a really strong game, I felt, in this, and that's a goal that will do him the world of good, because in terms of goals for the season, is probably not looking particularly great. But
he definitely should have had another as well, though.
Yeah, he should.
absolutely, and the scoreline, it didn't. It wasn't flattering Arsenal at all. They could and should have scored more. I know a lot, obviously, Newcastle fans are probably thinking that's probably they didn't expect much from this game. I think how Arsenal were coming into the game in such strong form, and obviously the amount of injuries and obviously players that Newcastle are still missing, they probably thought it's kind of a bonus game for them. But I think with how Arsenal actually dealt with it, efficient and just absolutely brutal in the demolition of them, really.
Well, cast your mind back to November, Miles, the last time these two teams met in very controversial circumstances. An Anthony Gordon goal, I believe it was, that went out but didn't go out. And then the whole melee that happened in the box where there was a foul or there wasn't a foul, but eventually a goal was given. Arsenal then, compared to Arsenal now, seem a different proposition, don't they? Since the turn of the year, they've just suddenly clicked into gear. And I think we were arguing on the podcast, I think before the new year especially, they were struggling to score goals. So why is it clicking now? Why have the floodgates suddenly opened? What's changed?
I think Odegaard's form has massively improved. And when you've got a player that creative that can kind of draw everything together in an attacking sense, that makes such a difference. They're rotating the forward line really well. I think Trossard's introduction into the team and the rotation that he's had over the last few games, along with Havertz kind of playing in that more central advanced role, it changes the system slightly. They're not trying to put everything down the middle. Along with that, we were talking about how Martinelli didn't really see him in the best of form either at the start of the season, and he's definitely grown into a slightly different role where he's not scoring as much as he was last season, but I still think he's playing fantastic football. So I think this team is just gelling a lot more again and kind of getting over the kind of disappointment of last season and looking at what they need to do to mature throughout this season. They're break they had just after Christmas seems to have done them the world of good to address the psychological aspects of a title run-in. Because if we're honest, I don't even think they got out of second gear in this game. Like, they were very efficient. And I don't want to take anything away from their performance, but they didn't have to do anything that amazing. Newcastle were absolutely abject, particularly at the back. They were terrible. But Arsenal, maybe they made them look that way. I think they just dealt with it very professionally. And if you are competing for a title, that's what you need to do in games like this. Let's not forget, it was against Newcastle that they missed out on the top four a couple of seasons ago. And then obviously we've had disappointing result earlier this season as well. So this would have felt like a really beneficial win for them, particularly in a weekend where Liverpool weren't playing.
Well, we talk about goals scored though, don't we, Dave? But Bukayo Saka, I think for me, is the difference maker. Really, he's scored in the last 5 games now, and we talk about him potentially being a world class player. I don't know if he's already there, to be honest. He's proving consistently that he's that level. But I mean, what does it take to prove him as a world class player? Maybe seeing this title over the line would seal that for Saka. What do you think?
I think just maintaining that level of consistency. He went through that period where obviously it wasn't as productive, I don't think, as he would have liked to be. And I don't think Arteta would have been quite as happy with him as he has been earlier on in the season. But I think he's unplayable at the minute in this form. And I think when he provides you that ability to win matches and to score goals like he does, then, you know, the sky's the limit for him. We know how much potential he has, and we know as England fans how excited we are for him to reach the levels that, you know, England fans want him to as well. So it's endless possibilities, really. I think him as a player, to maintain that consistency, will probably take him to that next level and to score goals and make assists and literally just contribute to the team's success throughout the whole season. And I think he's got to understand, especially as a kind of player, he's got to understand that he's probably not going to score every single game. He's not going to score. He's
not going to play against Loris Karius every week. That's why. He was shocking.
Yeah.
No, but I think it's about having those realistic expectations. He's definitely maturing really nicely, though. He's making his decision making is improved no end.
Do you know what? I watched this game with my brother-in-law, who obviously is a big Arsenal fan, and he asked me a really interesting question about Saka, that do we almost underappreciate him? Because we were talking about this season about Saka not being in the best of form, and then look at the goal-scoring numbers he's putting up, and he compared him to like Phil Foden, who we talk about as like the future of England and has been this incredible footballer, and Saka is outperforming him still. Have we got so used to Saka already, bear in mind how young he is, that actually we forget quite how good a footballer he is? I think it's actually a fair point.
I think Saka's almost indicative of where we see Arsenal now as a mentally strong force, because last season they were fragile mentally, I think. And that's the difference between title winners, is who's the strongest up here going into that run-in. And it's always been Man City. We know that. And I think that's what Liverpool's challenge will be as well, is whether they can stay focused when they've got so much going on with the Klopp distraction potentially and the injuries. But with Arsenal, it's always been, yes, they can turn it on the pitch, but can they keep that focus in their heads? And it's always in their heads where it feels like they lose it.
I think their mentality is definitely improved. I mean, you look at not
Saka
just
as well. He's kind of the key to that.
Not just the forward players deciding matches, but you look at the amount of goals they've scored from set pieces this season.
Absolutely.
And I think Gabriel was massively improved.
100%.
And then you look at, obviously, they really had Saliba in there saying, you know, he's the leader from the back. Actually, Gabriel was he's been at the same level. Yeah, it's been absolutely superb.
Well, Declan Rice said that about his assessment of Arsenal since he's come in. They're the two players, I think he said, that were like, wow, they're so much better than I expected. And, you know, from Declan Rice as well, who's a key player for them, to notice that is pretty admirable.
Just one final point on this game before we do move on. You started this chat with, none of us saw this result coming. I have to say, I watched this game with my 8-year-old nephew, who's getting into football at the moment and is an Arsenal fan. And I said to him before the game, go on then, tell me what the score is going to be. He said, I think Arsenal scored 4 goals. I said, really? 4? What about the other team? He was like, only 1. And I've asked him what the lottery numbers are for this week as well, because it was a pretty good shout from him. 3 football podcasters, we wouldn't have seen that result coming, but my 8-year-old nephew, who's watched about 4 games in his life, was like, yeah, 4-1 comfortably.
Great.
Well, if we need a guest fill-in, we know where to turn now, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We're going to move on to another title contender, or are they? Aston Villa 4, Nottingham Forest 2 is the next result. I only say that because Villa are, I mean, you mentioned it almost flippantly last week, Miles, about Villa still being in the title conversation. I don't know how serious you were, but they're 8 points away from the top, which but every other season is still in contention, right? And we kind of dismiss that as being too big a gap to bridge. But they're now 8-point cushion between them and Manchester United as well, after results didn't go United's way. So surely, obviously, the top four is the priority, and securing that, this is a huge leap towards that, isn't it?
I just have to say, I'm not sure you can say results didn't go United's way when you mean United lost.
They were humbled once more, yeah.
It's very much in their hands. Top four is definitely the priority still, and it has to be top four at the moment as well, because Arsenal did Villa dirty this week by losing to Porto and knocking us down in the coefficient for the 5th place. But fantastic to see the win, and particularly when we've seen a couple of games this season where Villa have taken bigger leads, let another team back in, and looked really rattled. So for first 30 minutes, Villa embarrassed Forest. They were terrible, Forest. They just picked them apart, and it looked like it could be an absolute demolition, a bit similar to the Brighton game earlier in the season. The fact that they got those 2 goals, one either side at half-time, so quickly and got themselves back into the game, I was worried, because I've seen Villa do that with United this season, where they take a lead, throw it away, and they really struggle. So for them to go and get that 4th goal, seal the victory, is a huge statement of intent for them maintaining their place at the top end of the table. And to draw a bit of a gap between them and Spurs and them and United is really, really important, particularly when we've got a huge week coming. Yeah. We've got Ajax, Spurs, Ajax within a week. Well, that is going to be incredible for Villa. And that is exactly what Villa fans want from this season. Yeah. You want to be competing at the top end and competing for something serious. And I hope that our squad gets through that. Because again, Torres went off at half-time again and no one said anything since. So I'm a bit worried about that.
Yeah, that's a big concern, isn't it? I mean, we were only talking last week about the influence of Pau Torres on Villa's, not just defensive play, but just going forward as well, because he steps out from the back so well. But Dave, at this point, when they were 3-0 up, I mean, they were coasting, and we said on our WhatsApp group chat, didn't we, they're coasting, this is easy, they're making a mockery of Forest. But when it went back to 3-2 and Forest pegged them back, did you start to wonder, maybe, or did you feel like this was never in doubt?
I think it could, obviously... in that moment, obviously, when it went to 3-1, and obviously earlier on in the second half when it went to 3-2, I'm sure Miles was probably like, "Oh no, here we go." But
they had Alanga had a chance straight after as well to make it 3-3. I was bricking it.
Gibbs White's goal was fantastic as well. I thought that was a really great finish.
I definitely think that will be a cause for optimism. I think for Forest fans, because that could have gone south very quickly. 3-0 down, heads drop. And it very quickly becomes, worse and worse. And I think, I don't actually think they played that bad, Forest, to be honest. I think in that first half hour, like Miles mentioned, the defending wasn't particularly great. We've obviously given Murillo a lot of praise over the last few weeks, but Bailey absolutely rinsed him for Watkins' first goal. Was absolutely. I don't think we can really slate Murillo too much, but because that was just an amazing bit of play, amazing bit of footwork.
I've got to say, Dave, you can, because he rinses him and nutmegs Felipe at the same thing. So yes, absolute credit to Leon Bailey. But the 2 centre-backs that we were praising last week, neither of them seemed to know how to deal with him, really. Every time he cut inside, Watkins and Bailey caused those two so many problems throughout the game. When they moved Niakata back more centrally, he did a bit better. But honestly, Bailey and Watkins occupy those 2 centre-backs so well, I thought.
That's the dilemma that he creates early on, Bailey. You just don't know which way he's going to take the ball. And the way he just drops that shoulder, and he can just literally take you down the line, like, as we saw.
And do you know what, though? Can I just say that's a massive thing that you can see Emery's instilled into his game this year? Because actually, he was very one-footed and quite predictable. He was always looking to cut inside and shoot before. And this season, he's managed to do that with really clinical effect, but also worked out that he has a strike partner that he can look for. And him and Watkins seem to have developed a really good chemistry. The fact that when Watkins scored that goal, the first thing he wanted to do was just point out, look what Leon Bailey has just done here, I think shows the kind of synergy that Villa have in that attacking lineup now. And it's vital that they hold on to those 2 players, both through the summer and through injuries, to kind of keep up this top 4 charge. But it was fantastic. And I think, actually, is this not very typical of what you've been saying about Forest for the longest time, Dave? That because they play so much on the counter attack and they throw so much forward when they are attacking that really works well against teams a bit further down the league that are a bit nervous and don't know how to deal with that. But when they play top opposition, it probably is likely to be a high scoring game because they have a lot of attacking talent that can punish teams, whether that be Villa or someone else. But it does leave them vulnerable on the counter. I thought they were really vulnerable.
I mean, the reason why I thought this could be a tough game, I think, was it earlier on in the season or was it back end of last season when they beat Villa, didn't they?
Earlier this season.
And I just thought the way that Villa play with that high line, I thought, there's opportunities there for them to get them in behind, and the way that Forest like to attack, and especially since Nuno's come in and how they transition so quickly, I thought, there could be an opportunity for a result. But, fair play to Villa. I thought they were so efficient, and especially in that first particular 30 minutes, absolutely blistering.
Well, they've scored 56 goals in the league now in 26 games. That's incredible, isn't it? I mean, that's up there. I think it's probably the fourth best number in the country. So, it stands to reason that they're fourth at the minute. Scoring goals hasn't been a challenge for Villa at all, has it, this season? And it's not all coming from Ollie Watkins, although he is key. Douglas Luiz with a brace here, Miles, as well. Leon Bailey, obviously, is a creator as well as a scorer himself. He's got quite a few. They're great going forward when it all clicks. And this was one of those days, wasn't it, where it felt like their attacking approach really showed what they can do and how good quality their players are when they do go forward, especially from midfield. I think that transition from midfield to attack is one of the best in the league.
Yeah, and actually Luiz's headed goal is a really good example of letting those midfielders roam further forward. Yeah. I think traditionally since Luiz has come to Villa, he was misused for quite a while and used as more of a holding midfielder. And actually you can see that he is an out-and-out number 8 because he can do so much in the middle of the park. And the more freedom you give him, the more control he'll have over the game. And now he's up to 10 goals for the season, which is huge. And I think looking that McGinn was the one to provide that for him as well, with a real bit of calm, composed technique on the ball. Like he sends the Forest player the wrong way and then goes onto his weaker foot and puts just a delightful cross into exactly the area that he knows someone's going to attack. Yeah. So again, it shows the connection that unit of the team has got. It's a real shame that I think one of the reasons we're conceding goals at the moment is because we've got these departments on the pitch now. We know who our forward players are. We know how they work together. Our midfield is really well constructed. And obviously Kamara coming out, that's not ideal. But Tielemans has slotted in really well. And they've built a really effective unit together. And yet again, we had another defence that you looked at this game, particularly the second half, where you were like, that is not what Villa expect to be playing. It was Cash, Callum Chambers came in, Clement Longley, and Moreno again. And it just seems like they can't quite get that unit to keep themselves fit and be as consistent as the rest. Because if they did, then Villa would be looking at trying to knock more on the door where Liverpool, Arsenal, City are. We're not title competitors right now. I don't think we are. I think 8 points is too far to catch 3 teams of that quality. But I am really proud of the showing that they're putting in still, and the fact that we're now entering March in the top 4 still. That's incredible.
Yeah, well, like I say, conceding goals is probably still the area you need to work on. But defensively, you can't really argue with the amount of injuries you're stacking up against now. It's a tough ask to even sort of not concede at all. But Forest, as you say, Dave, were kind of almost the perfect team to try and test that. Villa passed that test. And it was a front-footed display from the start, really, from Villa, wasn't it? They were pretty relentless from the off. Do you think they're England's 4th best team, Dave? Not just based on form, but also just looking at them versus Tottenham, let's face it, are their rivals for 4th spot. What do you think?
It's between them and Spurs, isn't it? I think it's going to be interesting, actually, when they next play Spurs. And providing hopefully, both teams have got, all of their players available to them, although it's obviously not going to be the case with Villa, obviously with some of the long-term injuries that they've got. But if they're somewhere near their very best, because let's be honest, we don't want to be seeing teams coming up against each other where, for instance, the Chelsea-Liverpool game today, you want to see both teams having the best players fully available. And sure. I think it's a functional team. We've seen Spurs... I think both teams have had the odd banana skin. Obviously, Villa had a bit of a tough January and turn of the year. They struggled a little bit, but they've shown and recovered fully from that and look in great form. I think there's a great argument for it. I think at the minute, probably Villa are probably the fourth best team in the league. And I think you've got to just give them so much credit for how far they've come. I think Emery will definitely be looking how to improve this team, though. And for me, I think there's a couple of holes in that team which can definitely be improved on. I think probably that left side, particularly probably the inside forward area, because I think a little bit at times too much goes down that right-hand side for Villa, and I think they need a little bit more balance on that left-hand side. It'd be interesting to see whether they take up that option on Zaniolo and whether they look to make that permanent. I don't think that's going to happen at the minute.
Definitely, I'm really confident they're not going to, which is a shame because he's just not getting any game time at the moment. They've obviously Ramsey came back from injury and they've put Ramsey back in there, and that seems to have been it for him, which is a shame because I don't think we've seen the best of him. And with the kind of the availability of him on quite a cheap buyout, I think it would have made a lot of sense if he'd had some time to grow into the team, but. I think that's a circumstantial one. Obviously, everything that happened at the start of the season around him and Tonali, I think really knocked him when he first moved over here. So that can't have been easy. The only thing I wonder is whether they have earmarked Morgan Rogers to fill that role now that they've signed him. Because I honestly, the other thing for Villa is, are they going to sell a major asset this summer just to try and balance the books? And there is a lot of talk that Newcastle were trying to look at a big bid for Jacob Ramsey in January. Now, Ramsey's playing that left-hand side role at the moment. If they can get 65 million for Ramsey and he's an academy product, I'd be gutted to see it, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Is it? Do you know, it's really confusing, actually, to be fair. I wouldn't be surprised if Moussa Diaby probably moves on this one because as promising a start as he had to the season, he's not. Do you know what I mean? He's
but look at Bailey
at times.
It's true, but Bailey had exactly the same thing. Everyone needs that adjustment period coming over to the league. And actually, I think we could comfortably say that Diaby's ceiling is one of the highest in the squad.
Yeah,
like, if he clicked, he'd be one of the best wingers in the league. I fully believe that. So I think he needs a bit more time. And Bailey did exactly the same thing. I never doubted that Leon Bailey was an excellent winger. We just didn't see it for Villa when he first came over. And now we're seeing it.
Is there a spot for him in this side, though? That's what I'm saying. In this system.
I think there could be.
Because you've got Leon Bailey. Bailey looks like a favoured option on the right.
Yeah.
And then, let's be honest, he's very left-footed, isn't he? Predominantly loves to use his cutting on that left foot. You've got players like Jadon Philogene who's absolutely tearing it up at Hull City, which is a strange...
I don't know if we'll be able to get him back.
Yeah, because he's got a lot of suitors now, hasn't he, as well?
Yeah. Apparently. I think you can get them all in, and Mike's right, it is a squad, particularly if we qualify for the Champions League.
Definitely.
If we're in the Champions League next year, you absolutely need to keep players like Diaby because they are star quality and they are ones that will take those occasions on. And I think we'll only see him improve in this Villa team. I think it helps that Bailey has kind of set the benchmark. He made the move from the same club. They know each other well. He's adjusted to the league really well. What Diaby needs to do is take the opportunities like Bailey was. So when Bailey was a substitute, but coming on, really impacting games, getting himself on the score sheet, that helped him build the confidence, the understanding of the team, and also the confidence of the manager. Diaby will have the opportunity to do that very soon.
We had the same conversation at the end of last season, though. I think you had doubts, Miles, that whether Leon Bailey would still be at Villa this season, didn't you?
I thought they might move him on. I did think, but he'd been there a little bit longer, and it seemed like that one wasn't going to kind of get where we needed to. And there was a lot of talk that Emery wasn't that sold on him. And I think you saw that at the start of the season. He wasn't starting games, but he's played himself into that team. That's what any top player needs to do, really.
So we're going to finish the pod anyway on a slightly different note, guys. We're going to look at Crystal Palace, who we looked at just a few weeks ago, and we're questioning whether they were stagnating and standing still and whether Roy Hodgson was the kind of figure they needed to take them forward. Fans were kind of emphatic in thinking that they needed something new, some positivity more than anything. And they beat Burnley 3-0 this week in the first game of the Oliver Glasner era. And I think that's an answer to the question as to whether he's going to provide positivity. I mean, although the red card for Josh Brownhill in the first half really helped, 3-0 was exactly what fans needed to see just to get them up on the seats again and to sort of be optimistic about the future. But Miles, what did you see from the way Glasner set up and looking at his reputation in the past as well with Eintracht Frankfurt as well? Are you comfortable that this is a change of era for Palace, essentially?
It absolutely will be. I just hope that he can make the most of that because I feel like Palace is a really interesting job to take on full stop because they aren't a club that prolifically spend money to improve a squad. So when you bring in a new manager that wants to completely change a style of play and a system, that is going to come with a lot of heavy recruitment. Palace haven't proven that they do that at a sort of top level before, and you're now bringing in a manager who's recently won the Europa League. So you've got to do something to keep him happy. And if we think about how many changes Palace have had over the last few years, and stylistically how much that's changed, it will take him some time to embed that kind of philosophy that he has. So very typically, he would play like 3-4-3, press the ball really hard, be quite aggressive, and winning the ball back and turning it over really quickly. And actually, if you looked at their goals in this game, you already saw that they were looking to move forward really, really fast. I just wonder whether he gets the squad playing that kind of football, because theoretically, perfect. If you want a front three that's quite narrow, that will play good intricate passing, move quickly forward, Elise, Eze, and probably one of Mateta or Edouard are great for that. But then you spend the rest of the season implementing that style as Glasner, and in the summer they go and sell Elise. How do you replace that? If you try and change your system to play with a back three now, and you've got Mark Gahey and Joachim Andersen in particular, but then you lose Gahey in the summer as well, which I think is perfectly reasonable to suggest they will, that could be really dangerous. Palace are such a funny club to me. They've got some excellent players across that squad.
Yeah.
Mitchell, Gahey, Decore, Elise, Eze. I think realistically they'll lose two of them in the summer as a minimum.
Yeah.
And Glasner will have spent the end of this season implementing a style, only to lose really key figures from it. So it's an odd one, isn't it? I don't know whether I'd be celebrating it yet.
Well, it's just I think it's just an emphatic response to whether they're going to see a positive change. And there might have been a hint of maybe this being Roy Hodgson in charge, that they might not have taken advantage of that extra man, because he's quite pragmatic, really, isn't he, with the players he's got? And that was the issue. But for me, I was thinking the way he set up this team and introducing Matthias França in particular, and the way he kind of thrust forward really kind of took the pressure off the rest of the attacking players who we know what they can do. And his assist actually was a good example of what he can do. He was a really positive prospect. But for me, I think it was having the wing backs, 3 centre backs and then 2 wing backs with Tyrick Mitchell on one side and Daniel Munoz on the other. They were going forward all the time. And if they were looking for that nice balance between attack and defence, which they've struggled with this season, that for me was the key. And Daniel Munoz in particular was putting in crosses all the time. And I think he came from Genk in January, didn't he? And up until January, he'd scored 7 goals for them from that kind of position. So he's a real attacking threat. Dave, did you see a different Palace compared to what we've seen under Hodgson? And if so, what were you most sort of impressed with?
I definitely think it was evident, especially from, you look at the red card. Obviously, that press, it obviously makes Trafford hesitate, and it makes that pass into like a really dangerous area. Yeah. And then Palace are just straight onto it. And it forces the red card, and that was a moment really that really changed the game. And if you look at obviously Glasner's at the beginning of his career, it's no surprise the way that he likes to play. Obviously, his football education began at RB Salzburg, and I think he was given his assistant coach role by Ralph Rangnick, who we know about his philosophy and the way that RB Salzburg and Leipzig like to play. The very narrow, I think when they're out of possession, they like to close those spaces and create as little options as possible for when teams are attacking them. And they play that, like Miles says, that narrow front three. I think they've got a really solid basis and foundation to work with at Palace. And if you, like you mentioned, the attack there with Eze and Elise, regardless of what happens with Elise in the summer, that's another matter. But I think what they've got to work with now is perfect. And let's not forget, Mark Gahey didn't even play in this game. They dealt really well without him. So I think it's a positive time for Palace fans, which is obviously what recently has been a really difficult time for them.
Definitely. Well, Palace fans, give us your thoughts. Hop over to our YouTube channel, and if you're watching this video already on there, please do leave some comments. We'd love to hear from you, because we don't really talk about Crystal Palace an awful lot, and when we have done in the past, it's been a mixture of positive and negative, hasn't it, depending on what's been going on at the time, through the Vieira era, through the Hodgson era. But hopefully this is a start of some very talented players turning a corner.
So I think that's the thing with Palace, isn't it? And I think their fans have articulated this quite a lot, that they don't feel like the club have had much of a plan and a structure for a long time. So changing the coach so radically when they have obviously kind of speaks to that. They want to see consistent change. And I completely empathise with that, because actually Palace as a club should be a huge pull to anyone. Like, for Glasner to come and take this job, it's a London-based club who have got good history. They've been in the Premier League a long time now, established. That is appealing in itself. What they need now is the owners to kind of confirm where they want to, the direction they want to take them in, because they've got 4 owners, Palace, and Parish has got like a 10% share, but seems to run everything about the club. So they seem like a bit of a mystery at the moment, and hopefully bringing in a coach like this, they are going to give him time, because I wonder if a lot of Palace fans would go back in time and not get rid of Vieira now, and whether they would have seen improvements under him too. The good thing is now they've got someone with a bit of pedigree. Obviously, a European trophy is a huge thing. All he needs to do to try and draw people like Elise and Eze into staying is go, okay, look at Kolo Muani. He recently played in a World Cup final. I got him to do this. This is how I got him to move and developed his career. Let me do the same for you. Like, he'll have the buy-in of the players, I think, really comfortably. I just hope that he then gets the support that he needs from the kind of board and the owners above him.
Well, there's potential there for them, isn't it? I think this is the first time I think that they could probably reflect on the fact that Hodgson signed that permanent deal in the summer, and maybe they're thinking that probably wasn't the best idea. Maybe even Hodgson himself's thinking, I probably should have walked at that moment.
I think it's a quick and smart appointment by Palace. I think the way that they have acted actually is really clever, and I think it will be a good appointment. This is a coach who's highly regarded, in Europe, and has actually been looked at by a few clubs. I think I looked at in the week that Dortmund apparently were looking at him as well. So
another major pull for the Premier League, isn't it? We seem to be attracting so many top coaches, even down to sort of mid-table and below. It's amazing to see. But that's all we've got time for on this week's pod, guys. Thank you so much. Next time we talk next week, depends what mood I'm in, because it's the Manchester derby, isn't it, on Sunday? I don't know what that's going to bring. After the show in this weekend, let's just say I'm not optimistic, to put it mildly. Dave, how are you feeling, mate, about it?
Who knows where Man United are? I'm not particularly well, considering I think we've conceded more shots on target than pretty much most of the league, apart from Sheffield United. Doesn't fill me with confidence when you come
in the last 5 games alone. I think that's the case, Dave. We're just literally ripe for the taking for City, aren't we? But I live in hope. In the meantime, guys, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Please do hit subscribe on our YouTube channel if you've not already. See you next time, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, man.
See you again.